Hello, welcome to the next episode of our gardening series here at Prairie. We're glad that you could join us. Right now we're here at the Campbell Garden, and I'm going to show you some of the things that we do to winterize our gardens here at Prairie. As far as bringing in the crops that you have left, now we don't have many left here in the Campbell Garden, but there are actually a few peppers here that we could possibly still bring in and dry and use. Before you take down your trellises, you'll probably want to take the dead plants off of them before you put them in for the winter, because that'll just save you some time next year. Now, if you cut trees, these are saplings, to make your trellises out of, you don't want to have to do that every year. So you can save these for the next year. Now, this might need a little straightening up, but you can save your sticks that you have for your trellises and use those next year. You want to clear the garden so that you can till it or turn the soil in the fall. Now, after you get all the props out, you're also going to need to get all the dead plants. Now, the dead plants, the foliage and the leaves and things can harbor insect eggs and things. It can harbor funguses, mildews, and you don't want that left in your garden. Now, some of the plants were in perfectly good shape, so we can pull those up and compost them. If they've been diseased, don't put them in your compost pile. You'll want to burn those because you don't want to propagate that. We can just pull the plants and we'll have those ready. We'll just get them up and ready to put in the compost pile so that you'll have good compost next year too. So what we're doing is just clearing off the garden. Now, if you have any weeds, any noxious weeds that happen to get away from you back while you were harvesting and doing your canning and freezing or whatever you're doing with you want to get those weeds out too, because sometimes it's hard to keep up with the weeds when you're actually using the fruits of your garden. So get those out too, and any seeds that might be hanging to them. The next thing you might want to do is map out your garden. Where did you have things last year? Now, we have a very nice program here called the Mother Earth Garden Planner that plans our gardens and shows everything that you have, but you don't really need anything that fancy. Now, you can also just draw out your garden and say what was where. Another reason you want to map out your garden is so that, because some plants use different nutrients. Corn uses nitrogen where beans put nitrogen into the soil, so you don't want to plant the same plants over and over. They're going to be using the same nutrients in a spot. Besides, if there are diseases or pests that were in that plant, you're just putting the same plant there for them to start right in again on the next year. So here we are at the Golden Eagle Garden. Some of the plants in your garden might need a little bit of help over the winter to keep them a little bit warmer. Perennials that you're going to have come back next year. Now, we've got some cardoon here, which is something that most of us don't grow. It's rather like a large thistle. But to mulch the cardoon, it protects it from the freeze and thaw. That's very damaging to the roots of plants. So if you can keep that soil temperature just a little bit more steady, you're going to do your plants a big favor. Now, you can mulch with straw, you can buy things to mulch with, but you've got a handy dandy bunch of mulch right in your yard, no doubt, and your leaves. Leaves are free. Leaves don't have seeds in them that are going to get in your garden, so that's a very good thing to mulch with. Probably best if you run over them a few times with your lawnmower to chop them all up so that they don't hold out the moisture or hold in too much moisture either. So I've got a pile of leaves here that is a variety of leaves. Now, a lot of these are the maple leaves that are already crunched up, and so they'll be fine to do. Now, as I say, if you had mostly sycamore leaves or the tulip tree leaves that would mat, then you would want to just run your mower over them, and then you can use them there. So what I've done is I've cut back the cardoon to about 1 foot high, and I'm just going to cover them over with these leaves so that the soil, they're just protected. The soil doesn't freeze and thaw all winter, and that can bring the roots up. It's just not good for them. So we'll just cover those up and have those ready for next fall. All right, so they're all tucked in. Now, you might also want to put mulch on your garden, or the compost that you've been saving. Now, our compost over here, I do the lazy compost pile. You just keep piling it up, and then later you look on the bottom and look at what we've got. This is wonderful compost. See, it's the materials that have been rotted down These are probably a couple of years old down here, and we just keep adding to the top, and then you can take some from the bottom. That you can put over the whole garden. You could also use manure. Now we've got rabbit pellets over there that come out of the rabbit hutch that we've got to amend the soil and make it more productive for your plants. Fall is a good time to turn your soil because, well, for one thing, if it's a little bit too wet, it's going to freeze and thaw over the winter, and that's going to break that up. Now, if you try to do this in the spring, it's wet too long, and if you turn it in the spring and it is wet, it's going to turn rather like cement. It's very hard. So you need that freeze and thaw to, now if your ground dries out real early in the spring, which it probably won't, you could go ahead and do that in the spring. But this will help the soil dry out quicker in the spring as well, so you can get into your garden earlier and get those early plants in a lot quicker, because you don't want to be in your garden when it's wet. So we can turn whole sections. This has already got the rabbit manure in it, so that's going to incorporate that down into the soil as well and make it much better for our plants. Now there are also a few things you can plant in the fall for next summer. Now we've planted here, we've got some shallots planted. You can plant parsnips. Also garlic are things that you can plant in the fall for next year, so get a head start on those. Now once you get finished with your garden for the winter, you're going to want to clean your tools because it's going to make them last a lot longer, and sometimes garden tools are not that inexpensive. So what you're going to do, you've got dirt, you might have dried soil on your shovels. You'll take a wire brush, and first you can brush all that off that you can get off. Just clean them up and get the worst of that off. Once you get the worst of that off, you can, if you find any places that have rust, you'll want to get that off as well, so you can use some sandpaper and just sand off any rusty spots that you have and just get that all nice and clean. Once you get the rust off, kind of dry it off with a rag, and then you want to oil it. Now, you don't have to get an expensive oil. You could use motor oil, but it's kind of toxic, so just vegetable oil from the kitchen is perfectly fine for oiling your tools, just to keep them from rusting. So I've just got some oil from my vegetable oil from the kitchen, and oil those tools. And then you're going to store them, preferably hanging. You don't want either the blades or the handles in the soil or on something that's going to be damp, because that way so get them all oiled up, hang them up in your shed, and they will last you for many years. Oh, thank you for joining us for our episode on winterizing your garden. Hope you can come out next spring and see how the gardens are doing, and maybe you'll plant a garden yourself.